are listening to Contesting Wrestling Premium, the show where, well, at the moment, the show where Ben and I are doing whatever we want over the turn of the year for a little while.
Yes.
And it feels pretty good.
Yeah. And this is sort of the second in a mini series of events that we attended together.
It's all very self-indulgent.
Absolutely.
If you want, I could tell you about all the times I saw mindless self-indulgence, but that's a different podcast.
I was there for some of those, too.
Oh, yes, a good number.
There was the one time we saw them 3 nights in a row at Webster Hall.
Oh, yeah. I would do it again, but my back. Well,
I mean, I'd go to any fucking concert right now.
Oh, for sure. If somebody had tickets to see anything, I'd stand in front of a guy playing a guitar. Yeah. Just come on, man. Come on.
So, hopefully this will provide a little bit of a distraction for you guys from the national social unrest. And all that.
We're taping this on Sunday, January 10th. I hope to have it out by this coming Thursday, and who knows where we'll be by Thursday. Good luck, everyone,
seriously.
Including future me.
But in a simpler time, almost exactly 14 years ago, Doc and I attended Jersey All Pro Wrestling Seasons Beatings 2007. On IWTV, it says part 1, but I don't think there were other parts.
I don't remember there being a part 2, no. But, I don't know.
In
They're doing JAPW dumps on IWTV, and they've only really done the first one and added a couple of extra shows. They've got more. They'll be coming as time goes on.
Dumps is somewhat the appropriate word. Though.
I see.
Yeah,
yes.
I mean, there is some really good wrestling quality in some of these JAP shows, but it's definitely a mixed bag.
Oh yeah, they were a local indie. They are actually, they still do the occasional big show. They are a large local indie, but they're a local indie with like the guys that trained in the area primarily, and then they would bring in a few other regulars.
Yeah, so they were sort of like a middle ground between the like super low rent indies like USA Pro Wrestling, whose indie shows were the first ones we attended, and Ring of Honor, which was a little bit more of a professional production. It had sort of national recognition. JAP was in the middle, which was cool because a lot of the wrestlers who we came to really like from Ring of Honor would also wrestle at the JAP shows, and there we could interact with them a lot more. They'd be walking around the floor. They'd have their own merchandise booths, things like that. So it was a more accessible version of the prestige indies, as you've called it.
Yeah, I had such a good time going to JAPW shows. I even went to at least one of them myself because nobody was going. And I was like, well, I have such a good time going to JAP shows. I'll just go for the tourism of it all. And I totally did,
Yeah.
Because like you said, everybody was closer. But when we start... Yeah, last time when we talked about the Ring of Honor show, you had mentioned that like you and me had been chilling for like regularly for like a year or two, and my first instinct was to think, oh, it was much longer than that. Then I thought, I'm like, no, it wasn't. This all like looking back, seeing how short of a time frame indie wrestling took over my life. And completely changed my mindset on wrestling in general, which led me to entering the business. It really is kind of staggering. Like, we went to our first indie show in September of 2004. We went to our first Ring of Honor show in December of 2004. This is a year and a few months after that.
A couple years. This is 2007 now.
Yeah, I was completely miscounting. Yeah, well, still, this was like 2 years after that. And by then, I completely thought I was a total expert on indie wrestling and that I had seen everybody wrestle that I was ever going to want to see wrestle.
You entered the business very shortly after this, right? I think 2007
was that
the
year.
Right? Yeah.
That was the year, yeah. I had already, like, made up my mind pretty much. Like, well, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. And then I did it. And here I am.
Indeed.
Hi.
So so what we would do is we would get the New Jersey Transit out to Rahway, New Jersey. And there was one show much later than this, much more recently, that I drove to. And that was actually, maybe we'll talk about it another time. That was my one really negative JAPW experience, was the last one I went to. But this one,
was that the Fat Frank tribute show?
The Fat Frank tribute show.
That is on IWTV, I believe.
Well, it's worth checking out Loki versus Rey Mysterio. And you know what? You won't have to sit through 4 hours of show before that, an hour and a half of which is Fat Frank tribute footage, which is mostly him gorging on incredibly fatty meat and barbecue, which is probably what led to his death.
Well, he did have a massive heart attack eventually.
It didn't help that my girlfriend at the time was a strict vegetarian and really didn't like watching all this shit.
Yeah. Oh, man. I was a vegetarian for 30 years. I never had a problem watching somebody eat meat. That's just pretentious. You know what? Never mind. Jersey All Pro Wrestling was a lot of fun in the mid-2000s. They had a real... I'm trying to take a hard left
what
here.
I was going to get to is this particular
what were you going to get to?
This particular show, so it was always a problem for us that the shows would go really late, and we would be worried that we would miss the last train going back to New York.
Yeah, like 1 in the goddamn morning.
And I'm pretty sure this was the show where we did, in fact, miss the train. And it was absolutely freezing out. And we had to wait for hours for my saintly mother to drive all the way from New York City to pick us up. You remember the...
Are you...
Yeah.
Hold on. I don't think that tracks. I think we left early to catch the last train, and we caught the last train. Because if we were stranded, there would have been a lot more people there. I think that was a different night. I think that was the night that we took the bus from Rahway to Philadelphia to see the show at the ECW Arena, that the bus then let back out at the Rahway Rec Center hours after the ECW Arena show let out.
You know what? You're totally right. And that actually makes more sense because I'm pretty sure there was someone else with us. It might have been Brian. It might have been Spoon.
It was Brian. It was definitely Brian.
And this show, I'm pretty sure it was just the two of us. The season.
I think it was just the two of us.
As you can see in one part of the show, which we'll talk about later.
We were roaming around. We like to walk and look at everything from every angle. We're always such spectators, you know. It's like if we're going to spectate something, we're really going to take it in.
Definitely, yeah. We weren't just going to sit in the bleachers the whole time. Though the bleachers were it was really a comfortable venue to watch wrestling in compared to a lot of places where indies were held. All right. Okay. So yeah, that clears that up for me. But getting to the actual show. So I guess we should start with the fucking announcers.
Oh my God. You know, I was barely aware of this because I saw very little JAPW not live.
Right.
You know, I would go to their shows at the Rahway Rec Center every couple of months for a while. Because they held them pretty frequently. It was their home venue. But I didn't buy, like, a lot of their DVDs or anything. I had no reason
We
to.
would watch their weekly TV show worldwide, or YouTube show, whatever, wherever on the internet
it was on their website.
Gotcha.
They had a web show before web shows were really a thing. But they didn't feature these announcers much.
No, not from what I remember. So some of the announcers were wrestlers. Arcadia, who was like a perennial light heavyweight champion for them, was there.
Yep.
Chino Martinez, who I don't really remember. And at some point, Monster Mac comes on. And the main announcer is, what the fuck is his name? Mark. I have it here somewhere.
Is he?
Mark Clemson. Mark
Clemson.
Poor Mark Clemson. We'll talk about him later.
Yeah.
I don't think he was the worst of them. I think it was mostly the wrestlers who were so bad.
I couldn't keep track of who was who. Like the announcing was atrocious pretty much the entire time. And it wasn't the kind of atrocious where like clearly they let untrained announcers on. It's like it was atrocious with intent.
Yeah, they were bad people saying bad things.
Yeah, and they didn't put over the shows much. You know, the biggest thing you could have done to have worth in these guys' eyes was to wrestle dark matches for the WWE.
Right.
And like, fine, but that's not how you promote your show.
No, and they were at their very worst during the women's match, but we'll get to that.
Oh yeah, we will definitely.
First, we have one of the JPW originals, Monster Mac, teaming up with Deranged against, they pronounce his name Javier, but it's written Hav-Air.
It's Javi-Air.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Javier.
And Rob Vegas.
Yeah.
Now,
Rob
Monster Mac and Deranged, we already knew from Ring of Honor. Deranged was part of Special K. Monster Mac was in the Hit Squad. And, JAP, when Ring of Honor first started and they sort of collected all this talent from the various indies, JAP was one of the feeders to Ring of Honor. And that's where we got Homicide and Low-Key and the Hit Squad and Teddy Hart. And this is one of the rare JAPW shows that did not have Homicide or Low-Key on it.
Right. Maybe they were booked somewhere else.
I think they were both in TNA at the time.
Ah, okay. Well, the TNA guys would still do indie bookings, but they may have been booked for TNA.
Right.
That week.
I remember
seeing Monty Brown at JAPW once.
You remember when Homicide was fighting for the JAPW title or something, and they're all brawling all over the floor like they always did, and I got up in his face and was like, "Why the hell do you care about this title? You're TNA Tag Team Champion." And he looked at me like he was going to murder me. And I believed it.
Oh, that's great. Homicide's great.
Yeah, I love Homicide. It took me a while to get around to liking Homicide. But
me
great.
too. Well, when we first started watching indie wrestling, we were really impressed by all the moves. But that wears off after a little while, and the moves are great, but Homicide's a real character and a full worker. He can have a great match with anybody doing nothing.
Yeah, he's got that very Southern Territories kind of style.
Yeah.
And he can also wrestle technically and everything.
Oh, yeah.
Real indie legend. But
anyway, he wasn't at this show. We get Monster Mac and Deranged. I like Monster Mac and Deranged.
Yeah, so speaking of JPW Worldwide, they mention that Mac and Deranged had been at odds at various points. And Monster Mac had frequently walled Deranged. And what they meant by that was the JPW Worldwide, the place where they would shoot it, one side of the ring was against a brick wall. And, was it against a brick wall or there was just a wall there?
It was outside of the ring. There was a wall that Mac would take people to and press them over his head and just chuck them at the wall.
And the crowd would chant, "Wall, wall, wall."
They did that, I think, the last USA Pro show we went to, the UXW as it was called by then. There was a wall, and people started calling for Mac to do it, so he did it. But that wall was just drywall, and it left a big hole in the Amazura. It wasn't like the wall you could throw people at. That being said, it was a terrible move. It was great to watch. It was like, I'd never seen anything like that before. The only time you ever saw that was when Kevin Nash threw Rey Mysterio at the trailer side of the famous NWO backstage beatdown. There's a reason for that. Can't protect yourself against a wall, especially face first if you're really horizontal.
So this match starts, and I knew that Deranged and Monster Mac were the faces because they're the popular JPW guys. But you couldn't really tell from how the match starts. Deranged just slaps Javier in the face immediately. And they're just all so goonish and shitty. But that's what the crowd wanted,
Yeah. It's very hard to describe the culture where being a real asshole meant you were the babyface. But not only was it widespread throughout the culture, but it was really concentrated in New Jersey.
Well, yeah.
And this really serviced that. The whole show really serviced that.
It truly is Jersey all pro wrestling.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how people who grew up outside of New York feel about New Jersey. But if you're listening and the stereotypes that New Yorkers have about New Jersey, JPW embodied them all.
Yes, it did.
Javier is a student of the SAT. That's pretty much all he had to his credit.
You mean the team that was supposed to wrestle later in the card but apparently couldn't make it? That's what the announcers said.
That SAT, right. They didn't make it. Yeah.
I'm sure that didn't do Javier any favors.
The only thing I have to say about Rob Vegas is a great chant from the crowd, a very like New York metropolitan area chant. They're like dun 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 dun. Vegas sucks.
Yeah, that's a very local
That's
one.
sort of like,
But everybody knew it. Everybody did it, and Vegas sold it.
it's our version of like some of the soccer chants that you'll hear at British shows.
Yeah. You go to the bleachers at Yankee Stadium, which I've only done once. You get a really good education on that kind of thing. It's all in good fun. Everybody does it, and then they all laugh, you know.
But hey, man, Deranged is fucking good. I always liked Deranged.
Yeah, I was always a big fan.
He does a great top rope Frankensteiner. At one point, there's a great spot in the match where Javier is running towards the ropes to do a suicide dive, and Deranged is behind him, but catches up to him and hits him with a 619 before he can get out of the ring. Very cool.
Yeah. Real creative, like.
But in the end, Deranged hits a springboard double stomp, and Monster Mac hits a big top rope splash because he's a big fucking guy.
He could get around.
Yeah, and Mac and Deranged are victorious in this opening match. It was fun. It wasn't a bad match at all.
It was what I had come to see. Stuff like that.
Then another bad person, or an especially bad person, Slick Wagner Brown appears and jumps Monster Mac and beats him down.
Right. Slick Wagner Brown gives him his finish. And
that's all we'll say about Slick Wagner Brown. Greg the Hammer Valentine and the Honky Tonk Man were there. They show them for a second. They were there signing autographs.
They were at all the shows in the area just signing autographs at that point.
Yeah.
Hey, former WWF Tag Team Champions, Rhythm and Blues.
Hell yeah.
Neither of them bothered to dress up or anything, but they look like that.
Honky
anyway.
had that hair. He always had that hair.
He always has the hair. That's right. And Hammer was there, too.
So then we get one of the great stars of JAP, one of the people who we always came to see, just to see what the fuck he would say and do, Mr. Teddy Hart.
Oh, my God, Teddy Hart.
He appears already ranting. Like, as soon as he's on camera, he's talking shit about something.
He's another bad person, but
Right,
man,
yes.
we were really like, okay, so one of the reasons we started going to JAPW is we heard they had Teddy Hart. And the thing about Teddy Hart was, like, we were big Bret Hart fans. We wanted to see the next Hart. And we had heard of Teddy Hart, but he wasn't wrestling anywhere. And he had beef with Ring of Honor for a variety of reasons. And nobody would book him. We heard he had gotten signed to the WWE, and then they fired him in developmental because you can't work with him. But he worked in Jersey for Jersey All Pro, because if everybody is kind of like that, he fits in. And you're right. He came out already ranting, and he grabs the mic and he runs down everybody and he says a bunch of awful stuff. And I was
gets
hanging
in the
on
ring
everywhere.
and immediately moonsaults because he had to. He is a
just onto his
compulsive
feet.
moonsaulter. Now, maybe I will say a little more. Like, Slick Wagner Brown had some talent to him. He's an abusive asshole. To his then partner April Hunter. But the thing about Teddy Hart is, as much of a fucking bad person as he is, he's just oozing talent. It's insane.
Yeah,
like
and ridiculous amount of
he
charisma.
should be one of the biggest wrestling stars in the world. If he wasn't such a fucking asshole, he would be, and he knows that.
He totally knows that. There's a Twitter account just called "Is Teddy Hart in Jail?" and it updates every day. No, or yes. Sometimes yes.
He seems to claim during that rant that Ring of Honor wanted to sell him the company.
Right. Well, I think this was around the time that there was a little bit of turmoil in the Ring of Honor offices, right?
Not quite.
Not quite yet.
No, 2007 they were going pretty strong.
They were. You're right. I don't know. Who knows? Who knows what Teddy Hart thinks is real?
Well, anyway, eventually Chris Hero comes and throws a chair in the ring. And I remember this is the show where I came around to liking Chris Hero. Because I think we both really didn't like Chris Hero. We saw him that first time when we were standing out in the cold to see Ring of Honor do something for the CW or whatever it was.
We were like the only ones that showed up to that.
Yeah. And that was when Hero suddenly appeared in Ring of Honor for the first time, and they did that whole Ring of Honor CZW war, and that had just ended.
That's great.
Yeah, so Hero's here, and so is Necro Butcher, and they fight with Teddy Hart, and then Jack Evans appears, and there's a big pull-apart brawl. And at one point in the pull-apart brawl, Teddy Hart goes up to the top rope and moonsaults, you'd think, onto the pile of people fighting in the ring. But no, he moonsaults directly onto the empty space, the one empty space in the ring, in the middle of all the fighting that's going on. Incredible.
Yeah. That's Teddy Hart for you. For sure. He was the JAPW champion. He didn't have a belt with him.
He doesn't get the belt until the ring announcements for the main event, where he's defending against Necro Butcher.
I wonder what the deal with
during
that
the ring announcement, you see them bring him the belt.
Huh.
Maybe someone had forgot to bring it to the arena, and they just finally got it there by then.
They were like, "Where's the belt?" And like, Teddy, we thought we gave it to you. And Teddy's like, "I don't carry your belt with me. I live in Hawaii. I'm not just going to take your belt everywhere."
That always disappointed me when I found out that the champion doesn't just carry the belt everywhere.
Well, some of them do. You know, it depends on the champion and the league and the belt. Yeah. Like, some of them do.
That was funny when Jericho's belt got stolen. The AEW belt.
Yeah, immediately.
Oh, and the fucking IWTV belt got stolen too.
Yep. They got it back.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. Moving on to the aforementioned women's match. Daisy Hayes and Melissa Stripes against Alicia and Cha-Cha. And Alicia was like the female star of Jersey All Pro Wrestling. She was the perennial women's champion there, I think, if they even had a title. And she's there with Johnny D and his stable, the D Factor.
I wonder what Johnny D actually did.
I don't know.
A lot of indies have a guy like Johnny D, where he's like a manager on the show, maybe cuts a promo, but really he's just one of the guys who helps run everything, who wanted to be on the show, so they let him be a manager, you know? It was okay. He was okay.
I think it was either him or one of the other guys who was in charge after Fat Frank died and did a terrible job at putting on that show.
I wouldn't be surprised.
But this match, it was really hard to pay attention to the match because the announcers were being so completely disgusting the entire time.
Yeah, it's just openly misogynistic and like not even like an attempt to be entertaining. Not like Jerry Lawler turning into like the cartoon wolf that's whistling or something. No, they were just like, well, we don't care about the match. Can I see your ass? Alicia got a boob job. Ha ha, boob job.
And with the exception of Alicia to like a very small extent, none of them were presenting themselves sexually at all.
No, they were trying to have a wrestling match.
Daisy Hayes, her thing is she fucking smokes weed. There's a lot you could say about that.
No, what they said was, and I quote, "That Daisy Hayes, she's hot."
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the match ends with Alicia holding Ref Hansen in her bosom so that he doesn't see Johnny D throwing a fireball at Melissa.
Yeah, he does a well-placed, by the way, wrestling fireball.
Well done fireball.
Just like,
but
boom,
was that
fireball.
really needed in this match?
He wanted to throw a fireball.
And Alicia gets the pin.
I'm sure they weren't paying him much, you know?
Yeah, that was very unexpected. For sure. I mean, fireballs in wrestling should be unexpected. But this seems unexpected and not entirely appropriate.
I mean, it was effective, but no, you're right. And it was weirdly placed. And I don't get it. But it got me when I saw it. I didn't remember that happening. No. I was like, the manager's going to, I hope he doesn't hit her. Fireball. Oh, that was a well-done fireball spot. Because a badly done fireball spot in wrestling is the worst bullshit you've ever seen. I reference you to the second Hogan Warrior match.
Which we have covered on this
show. Yes.
I speaking of things we remember, I actually only remembered two things from this show. Two of the matches. We'll get to them eventually. But there's one thing in particular that I remember very vividly, and I'm glad that it was captured on tape.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
All right. But before all that, we get Ruckus there with Eddie Kingston in his corner, who I guess was injured, and that's why he wasn't wrestling.
Yeah, I suppose.
Ruckus and Kingston of Blackout, the CZW stable that was a big part of the ROH CZW war. And Kingston, in his promo at the beginning, before the match, references Ring of Honor burying them after the war.
Well, he knew what audience he was in front of.
Yeah,
That's what I'll say mostly. He knew what audience he was in front of. He knew how to rile them up. He knew they wanted to hear somebody talking shit on Ring of Honor, so he did.
Yep. So Ruckus is facing the New Age Punisher B-Boy. This match was not on the match list on IWTV.
Yeah,
Instead, there was Danny DeMonto against Nikki Benz, which I don't know if that happened and just didn't end up on the DVD or.
I'm fine with not.
It's totally fine. As much as I like Danny DeMonto.
Well, Danny DeMonto's a promoter these days. He's stuck around wrestling. He's done his share of stuff. His matches were not barn burners, especially at this point.
Oh fat, oh fat, oh fat, oh fat.
Oh fat, oh fat. Hey, we watched him get murdered by New Jack once.
Yeah, and he brought out a box of cannolis during his entrance once, and we ate cannolis.
Yep. He was an entertainer. He's still an entertainer,
He was there at this show. You see him during the pull-apart brawl earlier.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, we get B-Boy against Ruckus, and B-Boy represents the strong style thugs, along with Homicide and Low-Key. And as I mentioned, Ruckus represents Blackout, so they were sort of building a feud between these two units. And it's a good match. There's, some really good chain wrestling. Ruckus is fucking awesome.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
He does a crazy shooting star from the apron at one point. Yeah. B-Boy does an insane double stomp in the corner. They really beat the shit out of each other.
B-Boy is really good. B-Boy just stopped wrestling mostly on the East Coast. He went back to California, and he just kind of stayed there. None of the big companies ever picked him up. And he's still wrestling as far as I know. Yeah. And he's got his little thing going on the West Coast.
Eventually, he wins the match with a couple of Shining Wizards. He did a really cool.
Yeah.
So Ruckus would do a top rope moonsault into a leg drop, and B-Boy very slickly somehow reversed that into the second Shining Wizard. That was really cool.
Yeah.
And so but at the end, Kingston attacks, beats him up with his leg brace. And, challenges, or B-Boy ends up challenging Blackout for the next show.
Right.
To face him and the other strong style thugs. So that was quite, I would like to see that 6-man if we did.
That was good. if they did it.
Right. That's the thing. Yeah. You could never be sure. Card was very subject to change.
Yes.
In fact, they referenced this at one point, that they now have a 0 tolerance policy for no-shows.
Sure.
Right.
That's until the next time Low-Key decides he has something better to do.
Yeah.
Come on.
Well,
I do remember hearing...
Yeah, what were you saying?
I was saying, I do remember hearing after this show on the Declaration of Independence website, which existed at the time, that they had they weren't sure what the card was going to be when everybody showed up, because some people of course no-showed, more people showed up coming that they thought weren't coming, and some people were promised matches here and there that they didn't know where to fit in, and they had to get everyone on the card. And it really kind of shows.
Oh, definitely. Much of this card feels very thrown together.
Yeah, the real indie experience.
Definitely. So, what was I going to say? Oh, yeah. Shortly after this show, in fact, they do strip Teddy Hart of the title. I think he no-shows the next show, and they strip him of the title. So, all right, anyway, the next match here is Bandito Jr. and Isi Negro of La Familia with the Outcast Killers, at least during their entrance. against Corvus Fear and Gavin Quest, who between them, I'm sure, own thousands of Magic cards.
Yeah, I'm sure. Bandito Jr.'s in the WWE now. He's a referee.
He is, yeah. I always liked Bandito Jr. I always liked EC Negro, too.
EC Negro's such a character.
Fantastic heel in that kind of old school model, you know?
You mentioned like Southern wrestling characters. I used to refer to it as like New York Memphis.
Yeah.
Because it was all of these like, you know, a lot of like Latin guys coming out to Latin music and hip hop covered in Puerto Rican flags. And then they were all acting like Jerry Lawler and Bill Dundee. And that was kind of, you know, the strong style thugs deal too,
right?
You know, and I thought it was great. I don't know, people don't make that connection, but I really think there's a strong connection there. They always had good matches. They also watched a lot of Poro and wanted to wrestle strong style, but the characters like, oh, the fireball,
right?
Lawler threw the fireball, that was the deal. So I don't know. It's great. EC Negro was great. He always came out, kind of out of shape, like really like tooting his own horn the whole way through.
But occasionally he'd do something super athletic.
I was great.
Yeah. And I love how they were back from suspension for spitting on the audience. And when they're called out about it, they're like, they were children. Like that makes it better.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, man.
It's wonderful. At the end of the match, he spits on an empty chair. He's like, I don't want to get suspended again. Big like cartoonish supervillain laugh. Throws the chair down. Awesome.
They do a lot of crazy moves in this match with like no pinfall attempts or like selling or anything. And it ends with Bandito does a Here It Is driver, and then Negro hits an awesome top rope leg drop for the win. But yeah, like the double down comes from Quest doing a pile driver. It's just, I don't know, man.
Right. There was a lot of questionable psychology on this show, top to bottom. It comes with the territories, but when you have people who are still just getting better, and a lot of it was like it was in style to do a lot of crazy moves just to show the audience you could do them, because it'd be cool to see them, and like that worked for a little while. But the people who were actually on top, even in scenes like this, were better at pro wrestling than that. Yeah. Except for Teddy Hart.
So next we get this medley of promos. And it was weird because they showed some of those promos in full at other points.
This was a direct lift from ECW. ECW used to do this all the time. Just remix all of your mediocre promos into an awesome music video. The thing is, this one kind of went on for too long. They used too many examples, Grim Reaper's entire shtick is just calling the guy interviewing him gay.
Yeah, fuck.
And yeah. But Delirious is in there.
Yeah, Delirious is great. Cabana is great. Cabana's really excited about the Hammer and Honky Tonk Man being there. And he wants to get Ruckus's autograph as well. Johnny D interviews Alicia's right boob.
Yeah. Is he at least there? That's part of like that's an angle. That's not just the announcers being stupid.
Yeah. Ruckus tries to cut a Hogan promo, which is pretty funny.
It was we get something from the participants of the four-way match coming up. We get very young Chuck Taylor and Ricochet. Ricochet don't got that accent anymore.
Oh my God. That was shocking. How
he's
thick of a Southern accent Ricochet has.
He is also from Paducah, Kentucky.
Oh shit. And
Taylor trained him when he was a teenager.
He looks like a very small child. He's got that really straightened hair, the long hair. This was, I think, the second time we saw the two of them. We had seen them in a previous JAPW show where they were just in like a total spot fest flippy thing.
Yeah.
But to that point, Chuck Taylor in his interview, he's all like, "Oh yeah, I'm in a match with a bunch of flippy guys. They're gonna flip about and stuff. Well, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just start choking people."
Yep.
Maybe I'll throw a couple of closed fists and then like hide them from the ref.
He already had his charisma just out there. It took him so long to get signed.
Yeah, and he was going to give someone a swift kick to the taint.
Right.
Yeah.
Chuck Taylor. I'm glad he's finally a successful professional wrestler.
Yeah.
Good. But right, so they remixed. This is I don't know how long it was. It felt like 27 minutes. I think it was like 4.
Delirious,
and it was just
definitely
too
the
long,
best part of it. And then, but then they show the full Delirious promo. That's obviously the same promo after Delirious's match. All right, so Colt Cabana versus Delirious.
Pre-boom boom.
Pre-boom, right? He had. I think later that year he got signed by WWE.
Yeah, they mentioned that he had done several dark matches.
Right. And this is before Delirious became the booker of Ring of Honor. At this point,
Right.
he was on the rise in Ring of Honor. And I really thought he had a shot at like being at the top. But I had a very different view of where wrestling was headed from the people in ROH. It's interesting because like I thought that ROH was going to go in a more sort of like comical, like cartoonish direction because we were starting to get into Chikara. And it was like, because that's where my tastes are going. I expected that's where wrestling was going. Meanwhile, I didn't realize that Gabe Sapolsky, who was booking Ring of Honor, had never seen Chikara. Had no idea really what was going on there until that one King of Trios where we saw him there watching it.
Yeah, like we saw him. This was shortly after he was fired from Ring of Honor. We saw Gabe there. We were like, we should probably leave him alone. And I thought, he was probably scouting for something. And it turns out he was just like, I guess I'll go to this show because he was like moping. And he said it like reinvigorated his love of wrestling, and he got what Chikara was. And like, good story.
I wish
Gabe's.
I wish he had seen that earlier because if he had, he might have done something different with the Ring of Honor product. But I think like Carrie. And Carrie in particular, but like Ring of Honor didn't see itself as going in that direction.
I think the Ring of Honor crowd would have eaten a lot of the Chikara regulars alive because as good as many of them at this point in the mid 2000s were, they weren't nearly as good as they were going to get. A lot of them were hiding behind their gimmicks and doing like competent lucha. They weren't doing like the stuff the top guys in Ring of Honor were doing. You and I couldn't really see that yet.
Right.
I don't
Definitely.
think. And looking back on it now, it's like it's true.
And it's like they weren't going to get Quackenbush himself as a regular.
Right. They tried. Ring of Honor tried. And Gabe addressed it in an interview. He was just like, we tried to get Quackenbush for more dates, but he just wasn't there.
Delirious.
He was busy running his own league.
Delirious, on the other hand, who wasn't a Chikara guy, though he did spend some time there, was a really interesting character. You know, he had this great persona. He could really wrestle. You know, he had awesome matches with Bryan Danielson. Obviously, everyone has awesome matches with Bryan Danielson, but he was transitioning that into like a pretty cool run. But they never really gave him the ball.
No, his first big angle in Ring of Honor was that he was losing. And on screen and later backstage, authority figure Jim Cornette told him he had to actually beat somebody or else they were going to kick him out. And eventually he beat Ricky Reyes.
Okay.
Which, like, they tried to sell as a big deal because he had been mowing down the Ring of Honor students. But the truth is, Ricky Reyes, as good of a wrestler as he was, he had not been pushed as a top guy or even a medium guy in Ring of Honor. He had been a tag team champion, feared and respected several years previous to that, and it just wasn't translating.
So Delirious, for anyone who's never seen Delirious wrestle, you know, like, to begin with, in his promos, he would just rant mostly incoherently, throwing in pieces of words. So you would get like his opponent's name or things like that. So, you know, he came off like a guy, like someone with schizophrenia rambling on the street corner, pretty much, which maybe isn't the most sensitive gimmick, but we liked it.
Well, he came off like if the Ultimate Warrior wasn't actually saying anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought the idea was supposed to be that he was mentally ill.
I mean, I'm sure it was.
And then he would like...
Delirious, right?
He would run around like crazy and then get in the ring and sit in the corner without moving until the bell rang, and then he would go crazy and he would run around the ring again. But so he's crouched in the corner awaiting the bell, and Cabana is just playing around with him. Cabana sticks his crotch in his face, sticks his ass in his face.
Yeah. No, Cabana knew what he was doing, and Delirious was good for him. I mean, they were both. I remember us knowing this match was going to happen before the show, because then we knew that they were two like comedic wrestlers that knew what they were doing. We wanted to see how they interacted, and they interacted well. I enjoyed the hell out of their interactions.
Oh, they had an amazing match while barely taking a bump.
Right.
And that's the art of pro wrestling.
Yeah, that's real good, you know.
There's some great. There was a guy in the crowd in a Vince McMahon mask, and Cabana distracts Delirious by being like, "Look, it's Vince McMahon," and he is distracted by it every time Cabana attempts to distract Delirious. He is successful, even when he just like kind of raises his eyebrow a little bit and looks up, and Delirious looks up,
and Cabana grabs a wrist lock.
Yeah. At one point, he ties his mask tassels to the rope while he's distracted. Good stuff. Lots of hijinks.
Cabana does the thing where like they're doing shoulder blocks, and he like takes a shoulder block from Delirious and doesn't go down, and then starts whining as though he's in so much pain his shoulder is separated. And I always thought that kind of thing was good, because nobody sells like that.
Yeah.
You know, nobody sells like a little kid who skinned their knee, because you're not supposed to.
Right.
But you could if you wanted to. That's a reaction to pain.
Totally. And then there's, at one point, I think Delirious just screams "hey" at Cabana, or Cabana screams "hey," and then the other one screams "ho," and they go back and forth until, of course, the crowd is going "hey, ho." Because
good stuff.
Something else that might not have worked anywhere but the Northeast.
Maybe not. No.
Delirious does his endless corner clotheslines, which I always really liked. That was the other thing about Delirious, is his move set was Delirious. You know, he'd do these cool things like it's kind of hard to describe, but he'd move from like a snapmare hold into a headlock, into a snapmare. Like he would sort of confuse his opponents by putting on 3 holds before settling on one of them.
Right. Well, that's kind of a take on the indie poor psychology trope of somebody putting on a hold and then another one and then another one, just to show the crowd that they know a lot of holds. Like, you can do that, but make it make sense. With Delirious, strangely enough, it made a lot more sense.
Yeah. And it allowed him to get the win, because you can disorient your opponent that way.
Yep.
So at the end, he does like an arm drag into a couple of different rolls, and then finally a crucifix pin. And Delirious beats Cabana in this match. Good stuff. Top to bottom.
Definitely
Great
good
match.
stuff. A lot more professional seeming than some of the things on this
I'd
show.
say,
even though it was comical.
Yeah, really the only like genuinely good match on this show.
Yeah.
I enjoyed most of the show, but this,
that's different.
Exactly. Okay, now we get the match that I actually remembered the most distinctly of anything from this show. Chris Hero taking on the one and only Hydra.
Oh, yeah. They reference Hydra as Hero's young boy.
Yes.
When he's coming to the ring. Hydra comes out to Brock Lesnar's theme music.
He's billed at 6'9", 340 pounds.
He's about 5'5", maybe 120
I think less than 120 pounds.
Maybe less than that. He was a skinny dude.
Really skinny dude. I don't remember too much of the details of his whole storyline in Chikara, but it was one of my favorite things that they ever did. They would put him over, you know?
Yeah. He would do the full Nelson, and they'd be like, no one can break it because he's so strong.
Right. They would act
they
like
just had
he
everyone
was really
sell
strong.
for him.
Right. Everyone would sell for him. That is not what was happening here.
No. Although they did, Hero and Hydra did have a fairly lengthy match by these standards. And by that, I mean it was like 7-8 minutes. It was Hydra getting a full match under his belt that wasn't like just Chikara gimmickry for 3 minutes. Right. In with what would have been one of his trainers at the time, like kind of leading him through it. And it was fine. You know, some of his moves were a little off, but all of the shtick worked.
Definitely.
And a big reason why all of the shtick worked is that Chris Hero knew what he was doing, where to place everything. That being said, it didn't work for that much of the crowd.
Well, I was going to say, the main reason why it worked was because we were there. And
Right.
Hydra was way over with us.
Oh,
so
yes.
Chris Hero comes
and we
out.
were standing there going nuts half the time for
So Hero comes out to Dead and Bloated by Stone Temple Pilots. Had to shout that out. And he gets in the ring with Hydra, and you can see this at around 1 hour, 38 minutes on the video on IWTV. You can see our heads in the foreground. And we're chanting, Hydra, Hydra. And Hero looks at us, and he's like, really? Are you kidding me? This guy? And we're like, yeah, that guy.
As you mentioned, we had just been getting into Chikara like the previous year or so.
And we didn't like Hero because he was an enemy of Ring of Honor. And I don't know, he had stupid looking pants. I don't know. I hadn't quite gotten here. Though I think
he was an effective heel is really what it was.
Yeah, totally.
And specially tailored to the indie audience like us.
Right.
I'm sure the CZW crowd felt the same way about Bryan Danielson and his stupid wrestling.
Oh, totally. As if you can ever hunt down anybody, a video of ROH Arena Warfare. Actually, Danielson had a really good match with Hero himself at the beginning of the CZW war. That actually at that point when I saw that match, I was like, oh, Hero's kind of a good wrestler, but I don't like him. With this match, I started to actually kind of like him. But if you can find Arena Warfare, I may have mentioned this before. It has the moment when Bryan Danielson became my favorite wrestler. He's wrestling Alex Shelley. And they had the bleachers. They had 2 sets of bleachers. And one was for the Ring of Honor fans and one was for the CZW fans. Because they did a double header of CZW and ROH.
Brilliant, by the way.
Absolutely brilliant move by Gabe Sapolsky. This is where his booking genius really comes in. That whole CZW ROH feud. CZW taking over the message boards and all that shit was great.
Yeah, it was all very sharp. It was very, very modern.
So all the CZW fans are chanting boring at Danielson, who's doing wrestling a very technical match with Alex Shelley. And so he turns to the crowd. He's like, oh, you want boring? It's abdominal stretch time. And puts on the abdominal stretch. Oh, fucking love it.
Oh, the abdominal.
It's got the abdominal on him.
Danielson knew exactly how to do that because he knew when the crowd wanted him to do something bigger. And then he'd put the abdominal stretch on and they'd boo. And then he'd take his free hand and give the crowd the finger. And then they would boo. And then he'd just stay in the hold grinning like an idiot because fuck you. He's Bryan Danielson. He's wrestling his match. You going to tell him how to wrestle better? I don't think you are.
Right. As you pointed out last premium episode, Doc, where Danielson wasn't fully formed yet. Eventually, he figured out how to play the character of the best wrestler in the world.
Yeah, that's very different than just knowing the most moves and executing them the most properly.
And playing the character of someone who knows he's the best wrestler in the world, too.
Yeah.
So going back to the Hydra Hero match, there's some great spots. Hydra staying in the bridge after Hero lets him go, and he can't quite get out of it. Hero does these repeated kip ups, and then Hydra tries to kip up, and he can't do it.
Right. A lot of Hydra's shtick is surrounding how he's not good. And
he's the opposite. He knew how to play the character of the worst wrestler in the world.
Oh, man. I mean, I don't know how much he was playing. I think he was the thing about, I'm not trying to insult Hydra. I was a huge fan of Hydra. I thought his act was great. But the truth is he was a guy who had just been trained and he was getting his first experience, outside of just his own promotion. On all his matches in Chikara, when he did stuff like that, it was always dressed up properly. Here, that's it becomes kind of laid bare that oh, you're trying to get over with this crowd by showing them that you can't do anything.
Yeah.
And he was not.
No.
The crowd was not. The crowd was getting into Hero.
Bottom rope Vader bomb notwithstanding.
Yes. He went to the second rope, was like, oh no, and then went to the bottom rope and did it.
And he did the earthquake.
He did
the big Papa Pump elbow. Good shit. Eventually.
Really good shit.
Eventually Hero hits him with an electric chair face buster, and that's it.
Yeah, stacks him up and just pins him. And he gave Hydra a bunch of offense, The announcers were just crapping all over Hydra the whole time also. Like, not even trying to put him over. Not trying to sell him as, like, the plucky underdog or anything. Just like, this guy's terrible. Chris Hero's finally in JAPW, and he's wrestling this guy. Great. Like, ugh. Come on, guys.
So then we get the full fucking Grim Reaper interview and the Chuck Taylor interview and the Ricochet interview. I didn't mention Ricochet is wearing a Snoochie Boochies t-shirt. Jay and Silent Bob.
Sure he is.
Fuck, man. Yeah. Oh, the Grim Reaper promo is so fucking bad. Well, yeah, I've been doing 4-way dances since I was born, banging 3 girls at the same time, you know?
Right. The only thing he can feel is lust and hatred, which was the style at the time. Yeah, it was just awful. Like, it was even bad at the time. That was like, because he had no, there's a reason a guy like Grim Reaper's been around forever and never really made it, you know?
I mean, yeah, he is, you know, well respected in the indies these days. He's a trainer.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
I don't mean to really talk shit on Grim Reaper,
No.
but like, he didn't bring anything unique or new to the table like this.
Yeah.
He was his gimmick was that he smoked weed. Great, you know, like Daisy Hayes did that, and she could wrestle a lot better.
Yeah.
And
no,
yeah.
Reaper's pretty good. Actually, he was at that Homicide tribute show not too long ago, and I thought he looked good there. Yeah, no, it's really mostly this promo that was really awful, and I imagine most of his promos were fairly similar.
I mean, it was a certain ideal of a tough guy
Right.
that people had, and he was just playing.
Right, what does he say? He's like, Jack Evans, you're like Malibu's most wanted, but I'm like Scarface.
Right, I'm a Scarface guy.
I've known way too many Scarface guys.
Yeah, you know, like Scarface is the bad guy.
He's the bad guy, people.
Yeah, he's the bad guy, right?
The bad guy.
And you know, I mean, and he loses.
Oh yeah, that's
Like
it.
he's not a It's the tragedy of Tony Montana is the movie really. Well, it's an interesting movie.
Yeah.
It's, you know, I can see why people idolized him, but you take the wrong lesson sometimes. I'm not going to go on and on about Scarface. I enjoyed I don't know why they did the promo remix thing. Then they showed everybody's full length promos that weren't as good as the remix of
Yeah,
it.
so we've got Grim Reaper versus Chuck Taylor versus Ricochet versus Jack Evans, sporting his Dragon Gate jacket because he had been touring with Dragon Gate. Man, Taylor and Ricochet are both so fucking skinny at this point.
Oh yeah, especially Ricochet. Ricochet made. I didn't notice at first how skinny Chuck Taylor was because he was standing next to Ricochet.
Right.
But they both neither of them are that skinny anymore.
They do all sorts of lucha shit. Lots of lucha shit.
It was a fine little 4-way like scramble match, indicative of the indies at the time, and these guys came from all around, you know, showcase in front of JAP, and like once again, we didn't mention like there's like 800 people.
Yeah.
Like, this was a big show.
They drew very
You know?
well. Yeah, for the indies.
Yeah, we're not just saying, oh, this was kind of a weird vanguard. No, they did business in Jersey All Pro Wrestling.
Big time.
In Rahway, you know?
Grim Reaper had some cool, innovative moves here, actually. He does like a suplex. He suplexes the guy onto the apron, but holds onto his head, and then neck breakers him on the top rope.
Yeah, that was cool.
I thought that was cool, yeah. He also does a baseball slide where he slides a little bit too far and wipes out completely on the floor.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Ricochet, the fucking insane athlete that he is, just does a drop kick where he does a full backflip and lands on his feet just because he can do that.
Yeah, Ricochet's natural athleticism was always quite a sight to behold. He did his double moonsault and missed.
He looked like he almost killed himself too.
He really did. I mean, that's a tough move to pull off.
Yeah.
Doing a single moonsault is a tough move to pull off, and he flips twice.
There's possibly the most idiotic Tower of Doom spot I've ever seen in this match. It involves like Reefer doing a poison Rana, like an inverse Hurricane Rana from the top rope, and it's a mess.
They clearly came up with a bunch of spots they wanted to do, and then
there are so many head drops that just don't end the match. Chuck Taylor's Omega Driver,
Oh yeah, I saw him pull that out. I'm like, oh, that's Taylor's over right now.
Nope.
No, it's just, well, he's here. You want to see him do it, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure we popped.
Oh, it looks like it kills you.
It's for those who don't know, it's you start off in the position like you're going to do a back suplex, but instead of dropping backward, you flip the guy upside down and pile drive him.
Yeah, it's like a more dangerous version of the Steiner screwdriver.
Yeah. Yay. So yeah, after Ricochet misses the double moonsault, Evans hits him with the 630 that the announcers idiotically call the 620.
Repeatedly.
Because they don't know how circles work and degrees and all that.
They don't know much.
But yeah, Evans wins this match. Little did we know at this point that, though I think we could have maybe guessed from the earlier brawl, that Evans and Hero would be making another appearance later in the show.
Right.
But before that, we get the tag title match. Azrael and Jay Lethal defending their tag titles against the Outcast Killers, Oman Tortuga and Diablo Santiago, who, as you mentioned earlier, Doc, it was supposed to be the SAT.
Yeah. Whatever happened to the Outcast Killers? They were always there when they were needed.
Yeah, and they were good.
Yeah, they were.
But here is the only, I think the only time I ever saw them work face. Because weirdly, they were the faces in this match.
Yeah, it was this job they needed to do.
Jay Lethal was like, you guys don't look like a Spanish announce team to me.
You remember the time at a USA Pro show where they had auctioned off the rights to be the ring announcer, and which means an untrained, unprofessional ring announcer was there. And he had messed up a bunch of stuff, and then at one point halfway through the show, the Outcast Killers come out, and he just like, hey, coming to the ring, the Outlaw Killers. And the Outcast Killers look at him like, really, you don't know who we are? Because the crowd knew who they were. They had been local regulars for years. And then finally they told him to leave, and Steven DeAngelis just happened to be at the show chilling, and he took over for the rest of it. Man. He was probably happy to have the night off, you know, and no more night off for you, Steven DeAngelis. You know who everyone is. Come on.
He was probably also happy to end the insult to his profession that had been happening.
Yes.
So Lethal, as we pointed out actually on the last episode, but it's more relevant here. You know, Lethal grew up in nearby Edison, New Jersey, I think. Elizabeth. Yes. Yeah, right. Right, we went through this whole thing last time.
Yeah. Lethal and Elizabeth.
Lethal's from
JAPW
Elizabeth.
and Rahway.
And his whole family would be at these shows, at the merchandise booth and around his sister, his parents. It was very much, you know, he was very much a child of Jersey All Pro Wrestling.
He was trained at the JAPW, the short-lived JAPW school by Homicide and Monster Mac and Loki. You know, and he won their like online Tough Enough contest, which I saw that once because they showed it as a throwback on their web show from years previous on their web show that they had as soon as it was physically possible to have a web show.
Hey,
and it's like it's him and a bunch of other guys doing squats and taking bumps, and then finally there's Monster Mac with him, and he looks like he's 17. It's like, this is Jamal. I say hi, Jamal. It's like, hi. It's like, you're gonna train to be a pro wrestler at the JP school, huh? And he's like, yeah. It's like, what are you gonna do when Homicide wants to give you the cop killer? And he goes, and then Mac pulls away. It's like, good luck, Jamal. You're gonna do great.
Oh man, wasn't it Lethal who took that fucking cop killer double stomp at Manhattan Mayhem?
Yes, it was. Occasionally, that gif still goes around Twitter. It's like, that is still the most violent move most people have ever seen.
I can't think of one that really tops it.
I can think of stupider bumps.
Sure, but not like
Joey Janela falling off the roof and stuff.
Right, but not an actual wrestling move.
Right, not a real wrestling move like that.
So, Azrael claims it's non-title, I guess to get heel heat. He tries to play it off like it's going to be a non-title match, but no. Whatever officials insist that it is a title match.
Ref Hansen,
sure.
Whatever.
Ref Hansen. Who the refs here were Hansen, Paul Turner, and someone else I didn't recognize.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Fat Frank comes out and says that the SAT are fired due to their zero tolerance policy about no-shows. Because I'm sure the SAT were under a lucrative contract with Jersey
Right.
All Pro Wrestling.
I'm sure cumulatively they've made hundreds of dollars together all the times they wrestled for Jersey All Pro.
Well, yeah, so this is the only time I've ever seen the Outcast Killers' faces. Oman Tortuga does a cool little, like, rolling Romero special spot into, like, a submission hold, another submission hold that I liked. They mentioned that Homicide trained Azrael as well, so I guess he also came out of that.
Well, there was also the Doghouse, in Brooklyn
Right,
earlier than
right.
that, where they all trained together.
Azrael, I met when I did that BCW show where I was the minister for my friend's wedding.
Oh, cool.
And I went backstage and I met everybody. Azrael's a nice guy. He was kind of a loner. He was sitting by himself, real quiet. But when I came over to shake his hand, he was super friendly.
Well, he's been around a long time now. He's probably distanced himself from a lot of the modern crap, It's just a booking, man. I'm just going to go out there, do my thing.
And his match was good that night, too.
I'm not surprised. He's been at it a long time.
If you can find it, I don't know if it's anywhere on the internet. That match he had, that squash match for Bryan Danielson that they had on the ROH website way back when. It was pretty good. Danielson beats the living crap out of him.
That sounds about right.
All right. So, yeah, the crowd didn't really get behind the Outcast Killers. I mean, they had been out earlier as heels with La Familia.
Yeah.
But yeah, they do a Romero special double stomp combo. Lethal and Azrael do, and they win the titles. Or they successfully defend the titles. All right. Necro Butcher gets interviewed before his main event title match against Teddy Hart, where he talks about the Jersey All Pro title being 15 pounds of gold.
Yeah, it's got to be some amount of pounds, I guess.
And some kind of metal.
Yeah, well, whatever it is.
But it had to be bigger than the NWA World title, right?
Right. It had to be bigger than the 10 pounds of gold. Or, I don't know, Ric Flair used to call Big Goldie the 20 pounds of gold.
Oh, he called it the 20 pounds of gold?
Once he got to the big gold belt, yeah.
The big gold belt.
Occasionally,
Oh, gotcha.
yeah.
I've been reminded recently because I watched the Lords of Chaos dramatization film that they put out recently, which was pretty good. That the original Necro Butcher was the bassist of Mayhem.
All right, there you go.
Yeah.
Different guy.
I was trying to remember.
Presumably.
Like, I was trying to list all the wrestlers whose names were also the names of musicians. We've got Sting, Sid Vicious, Necro Butcher.
Sid Vicious.
There was another one that I couldn't remember. We'll put this out to our loyal listeners. If you can think of any other wrestlers who have the names of musicians, we will shout you out.
Not counting Gabe Sapolsky's commentary
as Jimmy
names.
Bauer and Matt Pike, yeah.
And Matt Pike, yeah.
I don't think, did we mention he was Jimmy Bauer for All-Star Extravaganza too?
I think so.
Okay.
If we didn't, we did now.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, main event time. It starts out as Necro Butcher versus Teddy Hart. As we mentioned, Teddy doesn't have the belt until they hand it to him during the ring announcements. He of course does a moonsault before the match starts. And then
he's a compulsive moonsaulter.
Yeah. And then Necro attacks him and beats the living shit out of him for a while.
Yeah, and just rips and tears at him.
Did he have like a box cutter or something?
He had some implement. I didn't catch what it was.
The way Teddy was selling it seemed very realistic. Like, oh, like stop.
Yeah.
What the? No, stop that. Oh,
can you perhaps moonsault at me?
There's a spot where they're both fish hooking each other. This is
Yeah,
some fucking
that was pretty
dirty,
good.
nasty wrestling here.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Well, he was wrestling Necro Butcher's match. you
Right,
know?
and I wouldn't be surprised if Necro Butcher did not care for Teddy Hart. Very few people cared for Teddy Hart.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man. So, yeah, eventually Chris Hero comes out. He does a cravat plex on Teddy Hart. And Hansen calls it a no contest.
Yeah, and then the announcers are outraged.
Yeah.
That there would be
A DQ in Jersey All Pro Wrestling.
Right.
So then Fat Frank comes out and he says, fuck that. Hero is in the match. It's now no DQ and falls count anywhere.
Great.
Yeah, and the fucking announcers,
Paul
man.
Heyman, he wasn't.
Here's something that really encapsulates the attitude of the announcers, okay? The one announcer says, these are two very large men, and I mean that in the straightest of ways. Like anyone would have interpreted him.
No, I thought you meant their dicks.
Yeah, I thought you meant their dicks, man.
Yeah.
You're gay.
You're gay.
Fuck, dude.
Gay. You ain't gonna give me the gay with your talk about the dicks. So you get away from me there. Because you're gonna do the gay to me. I've heard that put so many ways. It's eye-rollingly stupid. And it wasn't like, a lot of the things like I'll put in context in terms of culture. That wasn't good then.
Right.
Definitely. That was just being stupid at the time.
Anyway.
And like, where it comes from, like, the people trying to do the stupidest parts of Howard Stern, not noting that, like, Howard Stern did a 4-hour show every morning or a 5-hour show every morning, and they'd hear just the most extreme highlights and then make that their entire act. And that's not how that works. That's not how Stern actually got big. That's not,
Right.
And I could talk about that culture for way too long.
Yeah, so anyway, Jack Evans enters, flips on everybody.
And now he's in the match.
And now he's in the match too.
Great.
And they do the whole thing where him and Necro are sitting on chairs facing each other, just punching each other in the face. And it's great because Necro wins that fight very easily.
Yeah, Necro and Jack Evans, yeah. But yeah, Evans is the kind of guy who he's a little dude, but he always projected like he was 8 feet tall and bulletproof.
Yeah.
Still does. I'm a big fan of Jack Evans.
Oh, definitely. Always have been. So then Teddy starts dishing out chair shots. Evans does a moonsault double stomp on Necro while he's slumped over the back of the chair. That was pretty crazy looking.
Yeah.
Necro kicks out of the 630. I think that's the only time I've ever seen that. I think because Hero was late to break up the pin.
Yeah, probably. But he had to get the 630 in. It's not like the crowd has seen it already twice or whatever. Like,
Then somehow Necro has a broken vinyl record that he cuts Teddy Hart up with. I don't know where that came from.
Oh, Teddy got really banged up in this match.
Yeah, bleeding profusely. And then probably the most brutal move of the whole thing. Necro does a top rope sidewalk slam to Jack Evans. So he takes the two chairs and puts them back to back. So just the backs are sticking up. And he does the top rope sidewalk slam onto the top of the chair backs.
Yeah, that looked ridiculous. It looked like it killed Jack Evans completely. And it was not the finish.
Thankfully, Evans' spine was very flexible. So he could take that sort of thing. Yeah, no, Hero broke up that pin. Then Necro takes like a really dangerous looking spill off the apron where he falls on his knee.
Yep.
Did not look very graceful at all. And Teddy hits what the announcers call the triple bypass, which is one of those corkscrewy senton top.
They decided to do a camera cut in the middle of it. Yeah.
Anyway, Teddy Hart
post editing. Yes, Teddy Hart wins with the triple bypass. I had so much fun going to these shows. We missed the main event because we had to leave because it was too late.
We
That's
missed
okay.
This match?
Well, if this is the show where we left,
I don't know.
then this is the match we would have missed.
No, I don't think we.
No?
I don't know if we missed a match. I think we might have missed like a segment at some point. Like I think it might have been the show where Teddy won the title, and we left right afterwards, and there was some kind of confrontation with Loki.
Yeah,
that we
maybe.
didn't see.
Maybe. Well, in any case, we had a great time going to shows like this. The fans were always up. They always had like interesting people signing autographs. The merch tables were just endless with T-shirts and DVDs and tapes and bootleg stuff. And that guy who used to sell like the $6 bootleg like shoot interviews that were just like they were clearly just VHS copies of the RF video shoot interviews, which was always weird because across the rec center there would be the RF video
Right.
table selling the same stuff for 4 times the price.
And then
I don't know.
there was the guy who was always selling the Japanese stuff, and he also organized those trips to Japan, which I had unfortunately never went on. But I had my own wrestling-filled trip to Japan years later. But
There were always wrestlers coming out selling their personal merchandise, local vendors selling like WWE and mainstream stuff merchandise, old tapes, WWE and WCW shows, ECW stuff, a real bazaar.
yeah.
Of rest. This is where you used to have to go to indie shows to buy wrestling merchandise.
It felt like a bit of a convention almost. You know, they do.
It was a community gathering.
They do WrestleCon now on WrestleMania weekend and everything, and that's sort of like an expanded version of what this was, for sure.
Right, something like that. And there was a real sense of something that was growing, and it was indie wrestling culture. And indie wrestling culture has gotten really big, and it's churning, and it's improving.
Yeah.
Thank goodness, because it was really bad through all the stuff that I enjoyed about it. But it had to go through its primordial phase because it grew out of indie wrestling from the 90s, which is like the carnies that weren't good enough to make it on TV. So that's no good. And it had to grow out of that because that was wrestling. And Jersey All Pro Wrestling is still around occasionally, and it was a big deal around the local scene if you knew what you were doing.
Yeah, and I would still love to go to the Rahway Rec Center sometime in the future if shows ever happen there again.
If shows ever happen again, yeah.
I'll take the train. Driving there and back wasn't a great experience, but
yeah. Well,
just having to drive so late at night because the shows always went really late. As you pointed out, the video on IWTV is 2 hours and 44 minutes. The show live was much longer than that.
Well, all of that merchandise I was telling you about, they would have intermissions for like 45 minutes or an hour while people got concessions and bought stuff and talked to it, because that was where everybody made their money.
Right.
Everybody who was going to make money was going to make their money there, and like it was always like they were like it's going to start at 8, and then it didn't start till 9, and because they were waiting for the SAT or something to arrive, and they never do. And then we cut out waits between matches, and it would go on into the night.
Well, premium,
as opposed to the Ring of Honor shows that just had way too much stuff on them most of the time.
Right. Like this was 10 matches, but none of them were particularly long.
No.
All right.
Some of them were still too long.
Well, premium listeners, we hope you enjoyed us reminiscing and revisiting this Jersey All Pro Wrestling show. We got a lot more cool stuff for you coming up in the next few weeks. We're going to do another episode on Royal Rumbles with Ref Katie Vella, who you, I imagine, all know and love at this point.
She didn't want to watch this, and that's probably good.
And then, and we're going to have Scotland Green back on for a progress show from the WWE Network, which was suggested by our listener and early guest of the show, Justin Carriacholo. So, hey, Justin, So, a lot of cool stuff coming up. And, Evan will be back sometime soon, I think.
Yeah, it's time to bang on his door. Indeed. It's January. Let's do this.
All right.
We can ease him back in. We can watch another movie. We need to watch The Wrestler.
Yeah, we'll get to we gotta coordinate with Jeff on that.
Yeah.
I have some ideas about what to start with Evan.
All
but
right. I'm sure we all have ideas on what to start with Evan. Evan will be back soon.
Yeah.
Good.
All right, and until next time, you have been listening to Contesting Wrestling Premium. We love you.
Peace, guys.